Hello everyone! Today we're going to focus on the geographic differences underneath our mythologies. Since mythology is often associated with the primeval observation and exploration by the early people of their habitat, the geographic features play an essential part in the shaping of their concrete and symbolic expression in myths. That's why, to look at the difference in mythologies, we have to trace back to their distinctive geographic features in the first place. Being a large country of long history and mixed ethnic groups, Chinese mythology is never a monolithic one, but a home of many mythological traditions. However, most of the studies on Chinese mythology tend to be focused on legends and tales in Chinese language. That is, on the mythological tradition of Han Chinese and their Huaxia predecessors. In this sense, Chinese mythology is believed to have originated from the Yellow River Basin. Being a semi-closed continent, ancient China has a sea to the east, vast desert to the west, and the Tibetan Plateau domineering in the southwest. This geographic semi-closure, together with the transportation limitation, blocked ancient China's communication and interaction with other cultures, but only to undergo the inter-ethnic conflict and fusion within the Chinese nation. This geographic feature is reflected in Chinese mythology as China conceiving itself in many stories as the center of the universe. Hence the name Middle Kingdom. In the mythological context, China, the Middle Kingdom, is usually surrounded by lands and seas, with heaven above and underworld below. Due to China's geographic features, its ancient mythology is largely based on the land, and various people and beings and their fantastic stories taking place on the land. During the 5,000 years of civilization around the Yellow River Basin, Chinese mythology was shaped out of times of confrontation of flood, drought, fire, and all kinds of natural disasters. And the primitive man had to fight through formidable conditions in wild bushes, swamps, and forests, with various wild animals threatening their lives. Thus, we read about the incredible account of all kinds of evil spirits, monsters, half-man, half-beast in Shanhai Jing, as a reflection of the fear of the unknown nature and the poor living condition of the early Chinese. Interestingly, it is never lack of spirit of challenge and rebellion against nature in Chinese mythology when their life is hindered by the primitive nature. We see the very touching and upbeat story of the foolish old man Yu Gong trying to remove the two mountains that block his way out. This seems to be a task impossible to complete. What is impressive is that Yu Gong believes that the mountains would eventually be removed if his children and their children, and through the many generations, persevered in this task. The story ends with a happy ending. The gods in heaven, impressed just like us by Yu Gong's hard work and perseverance, ordered the mountains removed for him. This famous fable from Chinese mythology has been well kept and passed down because it upholds the threat, emerged and cultivated on the land, of the virtue of perseverance and willpower. Another well-known tale of trying to change one's living condition is Da Yu, or Great Yu, controls the waters. As the flood was controlled and the river tamed, Dayu has come to be regarded as a water deity in Chinese mythology. However, ancient Chinese attempts to change the nature to their favor is by no means about placing themselves above nature, but rather is of benevolent hope to be in oneness with the nature, with a relatively better living condition. So it looks like, compared to the hedonic life of the gods of the ancient Greek pantheon, life in Chinese mythology is much more difficult. Greek mythology was hugely shaped by the geographic feature it comes from. Greece is a peninsula surrounded to the east by the Aegean Sea, to the south by the Cretan and the Libyan seas, and to the west by the Ionian Sea. Rugged mountains and the jagged coastline break Greece into many small, separate areas. Thus, never gave ancient Greece a chance to be a unified empire. Instead, this geography made it convenient for ancient Greece to consist of small kingdoms and later, in about 800 BC, turn into a city-state. This sea-surrounded geographic feature molded its open-ended marine environment, and travel was easier by sea than by land. The Greeks became a nation of seafarers, and they traded and established colonies all over the Mediterranean and the Near East. Due to its city-states geographic feature, Greek mythology is a patchwork of tales and stories. Though relatively integrated compared to Chinese mythology, there are some stories conflicting with one another, and for one story, there could be many versions passed down from ancient times in various parts of the nation. It is generally agreed that the roots of Greek mythology date back to two civilizations that flourished the Mycenaean before 1100 BC on the Greek mainland, and the Minoan on the nearby island of Crete. Greek mythology did not come from any unified storyline. What have made it up are some ancient beliefs merged with legends from Greek kingdoms and city-states, as well as mythological tales borrowed from other nearby peoples. These factors have formed a body of lore shared by most Greeks, and that is what we call Greek mythology. It is full of stories and tales about the gods, supernatural beings, demigods, heroes, as well as ordinary mortals, mainly to explain how the world came into existence and the moral teachings about how people should or should not live their lives. It well reflects the Greeks' idea of community that was shaped by the geographic feature of city-state. There are many stories in Greek mythology about being influenced by the natural disasters and forces of nature, which were seen as acts of the gods. We're mainly focusing on three major factors here: earthquake, volcano, and the sea. As the Mediterranean region overlaps the Eurasian and African ethnospheric plates, this area and its landscape have been largely shaped by earthquakes and volcanic activities. The early Greeks believed that Poseidon was responsible for earth shakes and often caused tidal waves in coastal regions. Earthquake happened because Poseidon was unhappy with human action and wanted to punish them by disastrous powers, which gave him the title the Earth Shaker. Thus, many temples were built to Poseidon as an attempt to satisfy him and spare his wrath. Volcanoes were also associated with the god's wrath in Greek myths, especially the god Hephaestus. Or volcanoes would also be the wrath breaking out of the enormous gods imprisoned beneath the earth's surface by the rulers of Olympus. Being the marine civilization, Greek mythology was ultimately and essentially shaped by the sea. As narrated in Homer's Odyssey, ancient Greeks saw favorable winds as gifts from the gods and unfavorable ones as punishments. And Homer often put the hero under alternate frustration and favor by the power of wind and water on his journey. The sea and the natural conditions make the ancient Greeks dependent on, fear, and curious about the forces of nature, which develop into a complicated and conflicted relationship between gods and mortals. In all, geographic openness with the sea has fostered in Greek mythology the richness of imagination and fantasy. All these are closely related to the geography from which this ancient mythology has been shaped and developed. Now, time to review. Question 1. How does ancient China's geography settle the foundation of its mythology? Chinese mythology is believed to have originated from the Yellow River Basin. It was a semi-closed continent surrounded by sea and plateaus. This geographic semi-closure, together with the transportation limitation, leads to its imagination inwards. That is, Chinese mythology conceived the ancient China as the center of the universe, hence the name Middle Kingdom. And mythological stories are mostly about what happened on the land. Chinese myths are full of exciting stories about early people's effort to change the unfavorable natural condition to their favor and to ultimately live in peace and harmony with the nature. Question 2. How is geography reflected in Greek mythology? Greece is a peninsula surrounded by seas. It has never been a unified empire, but consists of small kingdoms and city-states. This sea-surrounded geographic feature molded its open-ended marine environment. Its mythology is a patchwork of tales and stories and well reflects the Greeks' idea of community that was shaped by the geographic feature of city-state. There are many stories in Greek mythology about being influenced by the natural disasters and forces of nature, which were seen as acts of the gods, such as earthquake, volcano, and the sea. Geographic openness with the sea has fostered in Greek mythology the richness of imagination and fantasy.